Are you tired? Do you feel that you were inspired and you learned a lot of things today? Yeah? That's actually really good for me to know because, even if it goes downhill the next 30 minutes, at least you already got something valuable from today. So it's less pressure for me. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Bruno. I've been working with AWS for the past 10 years. I started in the cybersecurity industry, worked there for 7 years with AWS technologies. Then as a consultant, working with a lot of customers across Nordics and within Europe. And nowadays I've been working for Fortum for the past 2.5 years. So who knows Fortum? Yeah, we are in Finland, of course, Yeah, it's kind of normal. So you might be wondering what we do with cloud at Fortum. I'm going to give a bit of a flavor of that. So my role is head of technology and architecture. So I'm working specifically in the digital development, how we develop digital solutions and how we do innovation. And of course, when it comes to the energy industry, there's a lot that we do that might be a bit non-obvious, I would say. So one example is, for instance, solutions in the energy optimization, so optimizing the production of electricity with the consumption and optimizing that part. Solutions for sustainability, for circular economy, electric mobility, you name it. Something that quite often people actually don't realize is that Fortum is of course, a very big company based in Finland. We are the third largest clean energy producer in Europe. So we have quite a lot, of course. We are very known for energy production, nuclear, solar, wind, you name it. But we also have other business lines that are not so obvious, perhaps, for a lot of you. For instance, we have district heating, recycling and waste of batteries, of metals, and also consumer-focused solutions. And in addition to those, let's say, called enterprise business lines, we also have an ecosystem of startups that are either acquired or incubated or started within Fortum. So we have to, in a way, my role is to manage this chaos of different types of technologies. And why I'm saying this, because I want you to understand where I'm coming from and why I'm saying what I will say next, which is that cloud adoption in a company like Fortum maybe follows a bit the same of many enterprises. Since it's a long day, I'm going to make a quick poll. So raise your arms if you work on consulting company. And you can use this also to stretch, because it's been a long day. So and if you work in a startup. All right, and in an enterprise, yeah, you are. And in an enterprise? Wow, okay. That's going to be fun. All right, so for the ones that have been working with enterprises, you might have seen a bit this on how actually cloud starts in an enterprise. One is that all of a sudden someone, usually you have a lot of on-premises footprint, like a lot of data centers for many, many years. And then all of a sudden might be your internal IT or might be some visionary type of guy that wants to do a digital experiment, like they're going to use cloud. Traditionally, that's how it started. Someone wanted to use cloud. It might be from within that there was a generally interest on using cloud, or internal IT wants to use cloud because everyone else is using cloud. And of course, there's a bit of usually concerns and afraid of using cloud, of adopting cloud. But there's of course, it's better for capacity planning. There's a lot of speed and agility that we will gain, and the traditional, we will focus on our business, not on data centers. That's a very common first step into cloud. And then, of course, with that, when you start using it, you do get the benefits. You start, you start doing less capital expenditure, so less investments up front, and using more OpEx. So this, pay-as-you-go type of model. Your company starts to get new competences, new technology competences. You start to, the innovation starts to flourish in the company. You start trying out different things. There's more room for trying things. And of course, your internal IT starts to kind of blame everyone, like, yeah, this is getting a bit out of hand, isn't it? Do you recognize yourself in this picture? Or at least you saw the stories, yeah? And then the challenge is that a bit down the line, your IT actually becomes decentralized. There's no more central IT function. Everyone becomes a bit of IT. People started to use cloud for different things. And of course, this makes it really nice for enterprises to start using more advanced capabilities and even complex digital solutions and building those, which is really nice. There starts to be cases of using AI or IoT, but more not so trivial solutions in that sense. But of course, as a company, as an overall company, there starts also to be a lot of bottlenecks. In a big enterprise, everyone is doing a bit of different things. There's lack of context. It seems very hard there's like niche solutions, very hard to understand from, governance, what the heck is happening. And of course, this generates a lot of shadow IT and fragmented governance. Why I'm saying this, I don't want to sound boring with this, okay? I just want to give a bit of context on this. Because typically when companies look at cloud, and this is not, of course, not exclusive about AWS, any kind of cloud provider, if you're using even multiple cloud providers, the challenge is that companies the size of Fortum, and Fortum is not the exception on this, tend to think as a cloud in a very similar manner, in the sense of, as an operating model, like we don't distinguish if companies of our size usually don't distinguish if it's an application that we are purchasing from a vendor and then we are self-hosting in cloud versus an AI experiment or an innovation team or a DevOps team or whatever team that is developing, testing, deploying, operating the workload. Companies, and I'm using here the abstract, companies tend to think this as the same thing. The way that we treat it internally, like it or not, but it usually is, you might recognize that if you're in consultancies, you often blame our enterprises, the internal IT of the customer. Oh, God damn it, they are bad. They are blocking us a lot of times. We want to build a new solution, they are blocking us. If you are working as a software engineer in an enterprise, like too many governance, many policies, our internal IT. So internal IT is a very nice scapegoat for a lot of these things. They tend to get the blame, but they are suffocating because problem is that this was not their purpose, right? If you think about it, they were usually fulfilling our internal IT, or maybe the left side part, not actually, they don't know much about the right part. For the right side, they look at like, oh, that's the cowboys are doing stuff. We actually don't know what they are doing. So the left hand doesn't talk with the right hand usually. And this is what creates friction usually. Raise your hand if you ever had this kind of friction with about cloud with your internal IT. All right, half of the room. Is the other half the internal IT? Just could be, I don't know. But typically it boils down because there's different profiles, different needs with different expectations and frustrations. And this is a bit of the challenge that the left one doesn't talk with the right one. And what is the left and the right in this case? So think two different internal customer profiles. Usually on the right hand, I think maybe most of you will be focused on the right hand or on the right side here, which is a digital development team where you have a product owner, a tech lead, developers, QA, designers, and you are developing a digital product, likely using AWS, I'm guessing. Yeah? Are you 100% on this side? All right. You can raise your hand if you want. You don't have to. On the left side, you have usually like a solo person, which is like an IT service manager, which is someone in your company. If you're thinking about make versus buy decision, he is the guy that decided that is to buy, not to make, right? It is the person that has the responsibility in the company. We decided to buy that, or the company decided to buy that software. Now I need to, either we're going to use it as a SaaS, or we're going to self-host this into AWS, or, and how does that happen? And he's the traditional IT, internal IT customer, right? He's the person who interfaces with that. So you have very different needs and frustrations if you think about it from these two groups. So why do companies like Fortum or the size of Fortum treat them the same way? It's bonkers, right? So it requires that organizations like Fortum and the size of Fortum, but also startups, evolve their thinking towards a cloud buy operating model. And what do I mean with this? It means that we need to acknowledge that these two sides, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. So we need to separate these two into these two buckets, where your internal IT focus on these core IT applications, and then on the digital development side, you focus on those, and you acknowledge the similarities but also the differences. And now, of course, when you think about from the perspective of a company, you need to find synergies. You need to think about those similarities. And traditionally, when you think about competences that are involved on building any kind of IT, internal core IT or digital development, these competences, some of them lean more towards the left side or the right side. So if you think about, procurement as a competence, not a technical competence, as a competence, they tend to think more about, of course, they're more focused on how we are buying software. They are not that interested in how we are developing software. But if you think from cybersecurity, they need to be a little bit all over the place, right? If you think about your security operations center, we talk a lot about security, actually, the previous talk. They need to be focused on both, right? So there's different competences that are needed, but there's two maybe parts of similarities that I would like to focus this talk in, which is this middle part here in blue, the Rapid Development Hub and the CloudOps and platform engineering. And allow me to start with the Rapid Development Hub. And what do I mean by Rapid Development Hub? This is a term that of our own making. And what I mean with this, we had, and this sounds a very managerial slide, by the way, but bear with me on that. We had the idea of, because we have this culture of with the startups and of culture of innovation, we wanted to focus on, to find a way to do more rapid experimentation in a bit faster pace, meaning that we wanted to not just think about creating new startups, we wanted to enable anyone in the company, and Fortum has roughly 6,000 people, we wanted to empower anyone in a company that has an idea of something that could be done with technology. We were allowed to experiment in 6 weeks. So we wanted to, given anyone in the company the ability, you have an idea that of how your work or something that could be done in a different manner using technology, and we wanted to experiment it. What can we accomplish in 6 weeks? Might be a POC, might be, might be just a technical feasibility study. What can be accomplished with that? And of course, not done in vacuum, but done together as a multi-competence hybrid team, meaning that you will have design, data development, advisory working together with that internal innovator to work on that. And of course, before and after those 6 weeks, we want to engage that idea with the organization. So we want to have different other technical competence heads, but also internal business enablers to actually act as a virtual extension body to work with this. Sounds great, doesn't it? What's missing here? What's failing? In an enterprise, typically, consultants know this by heart, is that it often takes 1, 2 weeks, days to get the cloud environment, to get access to a tool, to get all of those things. So for 6 weeks, half of that time will be just waiting to get stuff ready, right? It is very common because you need to, security needs to approve this, or now we need to make a ticket to get the cloud environment, or we need to make a ticket to get the tool, or we need to, and it is bonkers, right? So how do you do this? How do you start enabling something like this to happen? You need to have the other side of the coin, which is, this is where cloud operations and and platform engineering come. But if you think about platform, what is a platform? Platform can mean so many things. So what is a platform? There's a guy that's a lot smarter than me, so I like to always, quote people that are smarter than me. That's why this is full of quotes, which is Evan Butcher. And he was saying that he described it as a digital platform is a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, services, knowledge, and support. And I would like to highlight this particular part, which are arranged as a compelling internal product. Meaning that, what makes a great product? You need to have customers. You need to have people who want to use the product. So a platform engineering where your customers are forced to use doesn't really fly, doesn't it? So you need to arrange things in a way that development teams have a lot of flexibility, that are empowered end to end, but without dictating how they do things. You need to enable thinking from those two customer profiles, like service manager and the digital development teams. You need to enable them to have a great experience, especially in this case, the development teams, because if we want to do things in 6 weeks sprint, right? So with that, we created a CloudOps and platform engineering group. And the main mission for this group is to focus on enabling a great experience for both service managers and software engineers, which means that they need to develop the automation to some extent, self-service capabilities, templates, reference implementations, all the things, all the harder things to some extent, or the things more related with the provisioning, with the governance, that eats a lot of time from teams. It doesn't mean that they do the ops while the team does the devs. And I think this is something that I want to stress right away. Meaning that the digital development teams, so like the Rapid Development Hub, the team has full end-to-end responsibility, which means that no one is going to babysit them to do ops. The team is a multi-competence team. So the team needs to do development, testing, deploying, operating the workload. What it means to have a platform engineering team in this particular case is that things, for instance, how do you manage your AWS organization? How do you provision new accounts? How do you, for instance, if you have tools like GitHub, how do you administer and configure that in a central manner that it makes it easier for teams? So it's from the perspective of not on babysitting teams, but rather doing the governance aspects of the tools and the platform capabilities that they will use, but giving them the flexibility. Does this make sense? Yeah? I'm glad that no one is asking for Kubernetes and stuff like that. Okay. We have teams that use Kubernetes, but we have teams that, they completely event-driven architectures with Lambda. You need to cater for both. This is not, a platform engineering team is not about providing Kubernetes clusters. And this is so important, right? Of course, if you have if you're thinking in most of our cases, we have very different business cases, which the teams are very different between themselves. So we don't have like a single product. If you have a single product with multiple teams working on the same exact product, then it might make sense to have a Kubernetes team, if you will. We only have one exception to that rule, that there's a dedicated platform engineering team for one business case. But overall, maybe to avoid confusion, let's not call it platform engineering team in this case. But so to enable acceleration, you need to have this both. Now, to enable a great developer experience, it means that this team needs to find ways to people to engage, to put things in a way that people can find the relevant information. In our particular case, we have roughly 150 internal software engineers, plus externals. So it's quite, in a way, dynamic. There's a lot of people that, that start to work with us, people that leave the company. It is very challenging also to find alignment in a way. So one of the things that we did to help to connect the dots is using Backstage IO. Who knows Backstage IO? All right, prepare to have your mind blown. Okay, Backstage IO is a tool that was open sourced by Spotify some years back. It is now one of the incubated projects in the Cloud Computing Native Foundation. It is really interesting. It is essentially like a develop platform. It sounds complex, but it's not. It's actually quite a simple tool, but can be extended in many ways. We started to use roughly 1.5 years ago to create our technology radar internally. So we had multiple teams using different technologies, and I wanted to start making some sense of the chaos. So I wanted to understand, what are the things that people are using, perhaps what are the things that we don't recommend teams to use for one reason or the other. So we started to use for technology radar. in digital development now we have, for instance, a technology rater for internal IT, for this core IT. We also have one that is, because technology means many different things to many different people. So we have one called Foresight, which is related with key technologies and inserts in the energy industry. So things, for instance, like nuclear and batteries, how they will evolve. So there's different technologies around that. We also started to use it as a way to compile our builders library and templates. So not to avoid people reinventing the wheel, but not forcing them, giving a lot of reference implementations to make certain things easier. Lately, we also wrote our digital development handbook, which is a one-page long document that essentially states what are the must-haves and the should-haves for any digital development team. And this is not something, written by one guy in vacuum. This is something that was curated from the whole internal tech community. And also Backstage allows to have an API catalog, which makes it really nice to, for people to discover what are the APIs available in the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it allows quite a lot of different capabilities. We deployed it in AWS. It is the most simple setup that you can't imagine. We are basically, the whole Backstage, it's a single container workload. It's that simple. You don't need to use Kubernetes. We use, in our case, AppRunner for it, and then we connect that with RDS database to keep, for the Backstage, to keep some state. Then we, of course, we are using AD for protect, meaning that only people with Fortum ID can use it because it's an internal one. But then the interesting part is that we started to develop this experience on how, for instance, how to accelerate the account provision. Like in AWS, how do you start to make it self-service for individuals and teams to start, if you need a new AWS account, how can they actually, instead of making a ticket, how can they actually get them by themselves? So for that, we started to connect this with Backstage for this provisioning. And then we started to use GitHub workflows together with GitHub Actions. And then we keep the state in DynamoDB. So we use the setup itself is quite simple, but it starts to allow a lot of flexibility on how we start building the automations, but also gives one single place where people can find anything or discover information related with Fortum technology. So information might live in GitHub, different GitHub repositories, or in SharePoint, or in Confluence, or wherever, but we make it discoverable by having them in Backstage. This meant also that when we start thinking about developer experience, we now think about the journey. And that was actually the first maybe step, was that thinking about what is the experience today? Designing that whole user journey from, this is the design thinking, you need to empathize and define how that is. So we started to think, what is today if a team wants to request a cloud account? What is the process? What are the steps? And then it helps us to identify, okay, this is actually the part that is very time consuming. This is the part that actually is hard to automate today. And with that, we started to explore what could be the self-service and automation capabilities. So how can we ideate and prototype that? And here, maybe one of our challenges was that Fortum has been using cloud for many years, but we used a vendor for public cloud management. So an external vendor that had a lot of opinions on how things were going, and there was a disconnect from how actually our digital development teams were using it. And one example of that is, for instance, that there was quite a lot of things with for instance, CloudFormation, and all of our teams have been using Terraform for many years. So something was a kind of a bit not matching. So we had to balance a bit the short term with long term, and there's nothing wrong with CloudFormation, by the way. It's just, and we are still using it, but we had to balance in a way that how do you make that then usable for the teams that are using Terraform? So how do you then start thinking about how do you extrapolate what are the account defaults and how can that be used as a baseline module for the teams? So point is that you need to balance the short term with the long term, and having something out there internally that people can try it out is better than perfect. Of course, there was a lot of interesting AWS discoveries from my part, and I've been working with that for the past 10 years. One maybe positive one that is that we started to explore AWS Service Catalog, not because it was just fun to explore, it was because the current vendor was actually using it within our environment, so we needed to start looking into that. And recently, the AWS Service Catalog supports Terraform, which was very convenient for us, or it looks very promising for us. Service Catalog is a service within AWS that allows you to define templates that then other teams, internal teams, can use. From the AWS account management part, who works for AWS? Okay, you're going to get some smack now. Because AWS account management is not good. There's a lot of limitations for it, meaning especially when you want to automate. Meaning, for instance, for deleting accounts, right? One example is that you cannot limit the permissions to delete accounts to a certain, you need to give like fully, which is kind of insane. Or programmatically setting root MFA cross accounts, or understanding what is the state in the account creation. We need to keep polling for it, right? There is quite a lot of challenges on, even though a lot of things work, it makes it hard to work at scale in that sense. So it is kind of funny how, the working backwards haven't worked backwards. So I'll publicly invite if someone from AWS wants to work backwards with us, we're very happy. Because a lot of things seem a bit cumbersome in that sense. Which is kind of fun because we're not the only ones with this problem. And this is something that we already escalate to AWS, of course. Now, one last thought that I wanted to give you is that quite often companies think about, from a customer experience perspective. Customer experience, of course, is fundamental because, without customers, you don't have a company. But to have a great customer experience, you need to also have a great employee experience. Without employees, you also don't have a company. Something that often is overlooked by organizations, not just enterprises, but organizations of all dimensions, is the engineering experience. Without a great developer experience, it's going to be really hard to do innovation and accelerate that pace. So something to give you some thought is that really focus on having a great engineering experience in your organization. It will not be something for 1 or 2 months. It's something for many years. It's something that you need to work towards. It takes time. It will never be perfect. But it is something that you need to start, putting that mindset within all the leaders in your organization. And with that, big thanks for listening to me.